I am 110% okay with trash talk, because the thing with trash talk, there is a point in time where you have to eventually back it up, and that's especially the case in the college football landscape. Welcome into the Hard Count, the People's College Football Show. It is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. Hey, we're glad you're here. We're glad that you're spending it here with us. We got a lot to dive into, as we always do on this show. Deion Sanders and company make some noise on the Twitter sphere. Now, to be fair, anything that Colorado and Coach Prime do, whether it's brushing their teeth, whether it's recruiting, whether it's playing football games, whether it's posting video on YouTube, whatever they do, it makes noise. Now, they made some noise over social media, and we'll give you our thoughts on that here in just a matter of moments. The transfer portal continuing to spin, man. The window is closed. The names are not yet off the board. Across the board, we got Penny Boone making a commitment. We got D'Angelo Pons, true freshman All-American corner from James Madison. He's in the portal. Derek Harmon, a little bit of intel dropping on the socials if you're dialed in over at the On3 main account on some of his finalists. We'll unpack that together. Jeff Sims committing somewhere. We'll talk about all that. Also, we got some news on College Football 25 the other day that broke. Matt Brown of the Extra Points newsletter told all of us, hey, there's going to be multiple covers when it comes to this game. So, of course, we reached out to Matt Brown on Twitter and said, hey, you want to come on the show and talk about it? He was nice enough to give us some time and talk about that game. So that's at the end of the show a little bit later today. Ohio State. A lot of eyes on Ohio State. And that's the deal whenever you wear that scarlet and gray, like you're going to have some pressure. But is it national championship or bust in 2024? I'll give you my thoughts. And then we have had this series rolling for a while where we kind of ask the question as we sit here in spring, hey, who are they? We've done it with a couple of teams. We'll talk about who we think Oklahoma is today. And then finally, our Rod Wave teams of 2024. The teams and the fan bases that have had their hearts broken too many times. They don't know exactly what to believe. But I think, to be honest, we can have a little bit more optimism heading into this new season in 2024 for 4 different teams. Glad to have you with us. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Also, make sure you're following on podcasts. We've had a lot of y'all dial into the podcast recently. I usually post that after the show. I posted or pinned the comment, rather, to the links on Spotify and on Apple. Bottom line, if you want to listen via podcast, just type in the Hard Count with J.D. Pickell, and you can find us anywhere and everywhere you get your podcasts. Let's get into this, man. We can't waste too much more time. The transfer portal is continuing to turn. Derek Harmon, Michigan State defensive lineman. Gosh, getting me choked up thinking about it. Michigan State defensive lineman Derek Harmon has 5 schools that seem to be the leaders in the clubhouse for him. This is per Pete Nakos and per Steve Wiltfong, who are crushing all the portal coverage for us here at On3. The schools are as follows: Oregon, Ohio State, USC, Colorado. That 5th school, where he just came from, Michigan State. Now, Derek Harmon, it's worth noting, during the winter window, jumped in the portal and then went back to Michigan State. So we could see the old okie doke twice from him, jumping in the portal during the winter, coming back to Michigan State, jumping in the portal post-spring, coming back to Michigan State. That could happen. Colorado and USC have already gotten visits this spring. He had a visit to Miami that he eventually canceled. Oregon and Ohio State are interesting because those are 2 schools that he talks to during that winter window, and he hasn't taken visits there during the spring window that we're aware of, unless there were some secret visits going on. For Ohio State, the obvious is you got Larry Johnson coaching the defensive line. That is always going to be attractive to recruits at the high school level or at the portal level. Doesn't matter. Dude can coach some ball, and if you want to be a defensive lineman in the NFL, he's got a pretty strong track record of getting that done for you. I think he's more of a missing piece for Oregon and Ohio State. I think for USC and Colorado, he's kind of that tone setter like we talked about yesterday on this show. If he goes back to Michigan State, that would be wild. That would be wild, and I would have no idea what to make of that. But apparently that is in play for Derek Harmon, one of the most sought-after players in the transfer portal. Now, speaking of sought-after players in the transfer portal, D'Angelo Pons is an All-American freshman player, a true freshman All-American player, rather, from James Madison, who's a corner, 5'9", 162 pounds, what they got him listed at. He is hearing from anybody and everybody for his services. Schools like Auburn, Miami, USC, Tennessee, and a myriad of other schools. I'm not so sure. I don't like him more at the nickelback spot. I haven't really watched any of his film, but given that size, I'm not sure I wouldn't like him more on a slot receiver or maybe add him into the box and go and make some plays on the perimeter. We'll see what ends up happening with him there and where he plays, but D'Angelo Pons will have his options, so we'll see what happens there. Penny Boone, after we got off the air yesterday, committed to UCF. Now, Penny Boone transferred from Toledo to Louisville during that winter window, and then went to Louisville, did spring practice, back in the portal. He's headed to UCF. The old double transfer from Penny Boone. I love him and KJ Jefferson in the same backfield together. That is first team all downhill. And Gus Malzahn's offense, they're going to run for a lot of yards. That's going to be fun to watch. UCF making their presence felt in the portal to this point in time. Michigan linebacker Jeremiah Beasley has committed to Missouri. Now, Michigan was the school of choice for him out of high school in the 2024 class. Did spring football and then commits to Missouri. So 6'2", 235 pounds, has all 4 years of eligibility. He was again, 4-star player in the class of 2024. All 4 years remaining. He's able to transfer to an SEC school post-spring and not have to sit out at all because he's not transferring from an SEC school. If Jeremiah Beasley was at Georgia and then transferred to Missouri, he'd have to sit out a year. But because it's from Michigan to an SEC school, he can get that done. Big Ten to SEC, no blockage there. He's good to go, and a big pickup for Missouri. This was one that I think maybe made a little bit of noise on the timeline. Remember Jeff Sims? He was at Georgia Tech, and then he was at Nebraska, and he's got a lot of tools. Like, he's a really talented football player who hasn't really been able to put it together consistently just yet. He is now headed to Arizona State. Andy Staples, one, does a great show on this very platform, so another reason to be subscribed, but also put out a great article kind of chronicling Jeff Sims' career and his time from Nebraska and all the way to now committing to Arizona State. Jeff Sims obviously was a starter last year for Nebraska. Didn't work out how I think everybody, including Jeff Sims, wanted it to. He ends up hitting the portal, and then he actually went back to Georgia Tech to get another degree, finish some credits, go work out with his old quarterback coach in Atlanta, and he's now headed to Arizona State to play for Kenny Dillingham. I say this a lot on this show. We are not journalists. I do not have a broadcasting degree, so we don't have like journalism or journalistic integrity that we have to abide by. We can have favorites. Jeff Sims, I openly root for. He's got a ton of ability. He's got a ton of tools, 6'4", 220 pounds. There are stories in Andy Staples' article about him and Carson Beck and Anthony Richardson all working out with the same quarterback coach and going throw for throw at different sessions. Like, he's got a lot of ability, just hasn't put it together just yet. I hope Arizona State is the place for him to do that. This is a great example of a quarterback watching the dominoes fall, kind of letting the dust settle a little bit on the portal, and then eventually, when Jaden Rashada jumps in the portal from Arizona State, a spot opens up. He becomes in more of a high-demand player. Let's call a spade, and now he has a chance to go compete for a starting job. So we wish the best for Jeff Sims. Again, we have favorites. Jeff Sims is one of them. TCU defensive lineman Demonic Williams is one of the top players in the transfer portal, very highly sought after. 6'2", 320 pounds. He will have 2 years of eligibility if he wants it. Big 12 defensive lineman of the year last season, coming off a visit to LSU. There's a lot of really good intel over there at the Bengal Tiger, our LSU on 3 site, so go check that out. The reports out of that visit are it was amazing. Okay, it was amazing. That is his words. He thought it was phenomenal. And talk about LSU and what they want to be in 2024. Defensively for LSU, change starts in the heart, right? Starts in the heart from a mentality standpoint, but it also starts in the heart of your defense. And the nose tackle position, the defensive tackle position, is the heart of your defense. LSU loses Mason Smith. They lose Mekhi Wingo. They allowed 4.5 yards a carry last year. I think LSU fans threw up in their mouth a little bit just even hearing me say that. He's a proven commodity, had 60 tackles, 9.5 tackles for a loss, 4.5 sacks from his 2 seasons at TCU. This would be a massive get if LSU is to land Dominic Williams from TCU. Rutgers quarterback from Owensboro, Kentucky, from Nick Brake's neck of the woods, Gavin Wimsett has entered the transfer portal. Now, Gavin Wimsett's an interesting case because he was the highest-rated recruit to end up at Rutgers playing quarterback. So let me rephrase that. He was the highest-rated quarterback to end up at Rutgers from the class of 2021. Was a 4-star player. He started all of Rutgers' games last year. Counted for 20 touchdowns. Threw for over 1,700 yards. Ran for almost 500 yards. He did not win the job in the spring. Sees the writing on the wall. I want to go play somewhere. Hits the portal. So this is one of those things where it's hard to blame Gavin Wimsett. He lost his job. He wants to play somewhere. He doesn't want to sit the bench. Good for Gavin Wimsatt. We wish him the best. So the portal, even though the window's closed, there's still a lot of activity in there. Would encourage you to be dialed in here. Encourage you to be dialed in here as we keep this thing going. All right. Let's keep on rolling. Appreciate everybody dialed into the live show. Everyone watching right now on social media, go ahead and like the video. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel as we're rolling. We've mentioned this for a couple of teams and got some really good feedback on the YouTube channel, so we're going to make it a full-on segment. Rod Wave has a song called Heart on Ice. And in that song, he has a specific lyric, and he says, "Heart been broke so many times, I don't know what to believe." And that's where he's at right now, okay? That's where he's at, and that's where some of these teams are at right now. You've had expectations after expectations after expectations, and year in and year out, they don't get met. For Nebraska, you've heard this many times. Hey, this is the year. And I've said that a couple times on this show. This is the year they make a bowl game. I said it the last year that Scott Frost was there. I said it the first year that Matt Rule was there. Hand up. I was wrong. On me. So now you're hearing people say once again, hey, Nebraska, get excited. It's going to be good. And you're like, listen, what JD just sang out of tune right there? Heart's been broken too many times. I don't know if I want to get hurt again. I don't know if I want to have expectations again. Here's why you can have some expectations in 2024 if you're Nebraska and these other teams. If you're Nebraska, you now have a game changer at quarterback. I'm not saying you have a Heisman Trophy winner. I'm not even saying you have an all-conference player in 2024. But with Dylan Raiola, more than likely going to be the guy for you behind center. He does not have to light the world on fire. He's just got to be efficient. He's got to put the ball in the right place and not give it to the other team. Because Nebraska, one-score loss coming in here, one-score loss stat coming in here. Just want to make sure we're on the same page before we fire it at you. 5 one-score losses. 4 of those one-score losses, the quarterback had more than 2 turnovers. 2 or more turnovers in all of those, or in 4 of those one-score losses. If you are just a little bit better at quarterback, if you're a little bit more efficient at quarterback, how good can you be? Because the defense allowed 18 points a game, and they bring back 79% of that production. The running game was great last year. They ran for 175 yards a game. If you just are a little bit more dangerous throwing the football, if teams just have to think a little bit during the week that Dylan Raiola might throw it over their head, that's going to make for a better offensive output. That's going to make for a better overall win-loss record, to just be real here. In all 5 of those one-score losses, Nebraska failed to score 20 points. So I'm not telling you buy Big Ten title tickets in Indy. I am saying, though, it's okay to have some expectation here. It's okay to feel a little bit more confident heading into 2024 that you're going to field a better product offensively. Florida, they are 110% a Rod Wave team, and I think it's very interesting the way that the country is perceiving Florida right now. Because all I hear about Florida whenever they come up on national shows or you hear them mentioned on different national columns or articles is they suck. They suck. When is Billy Napier going to get fired? And then I look at what they have on this roster, and I'm just telling you, man, something's not adding up here. Because when I look at this roster, I see a quarterback who everybody told me last year was going to suck too, and then he went out and threw for almost 3,000 yards, went 20 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That doesn't suck. They have a real Tier 1 SEC weapon for when you play the Georgias and when you play the other big boys in your conference in Eugene Wilson. He can be the difference maker for you. He's on your roster, so you got an answer against some of the best defenses in the country. And then defensively, you are light years better from a personnel standpoint. That secondary last year, you played a lot of young bucks. That's not going to be the case this year. You got some more veterans on the back end. You have a lot more proven production on that side of the football. So America and the national narrative is that Florida is going to suck and that Billy Napier is going to get fired. And I understand the schedule is a Hunger Games schedule. Do not get it twisted. But I keep looking at this roster, and I don't see where this narrative is coming from. If you're judging this year based on last year, I think we're looking at it the wrong way, would be what I have to say there about Florida. So I'm not saying Florida's ending up in Atlanta, but I would argue that I think Florida is going to be a little bit more competitive than a lot of folks want to pretend. I think they're going to be a bowl game kind of team, and we'll see what happens from there. Miami, same deal as Nebraska. A lot of people every single season are saying, well, Miami's this, Miami's that. Are they going to win the ACC? Are they going to this? I understand where the hype comes from. And a lot of people say whenever they see a Miami video or a Miami headline, the first thought and the first thing that people say about that during this month of the year is, Well, they say this every spring about Miami. They always say this during the offseason about Miami. And there's a couple of reasons to that. One, if you check every single fan base, if you were to check every single message board within the On3 umbrella, which I would encourage you to do so, I promise you, there is message boards that have fans that feel optimistic about their team. Reason for that being, last year is done. Everyone starts out the year undefeated. Everyone starts out the year undefeated. You look at your schedule, look at your roster. You can see a path forward for your team. There's no reason to be pessimistic during the spring. So, one, optimism's at an all-time high during the spring. Second part of this, the reason why it's cranked up the loudest in Coral Gables is because that's a massive fan base. And so everyone's playing music. The difference with Miami is they just got a bigger stereo than everybody else. So you hear a lot more of their music, hear a lot more of their optimism. But when I look at Miami, the reason I'd be optimistic is I think their roster, for the first time in Mario Cristobal's time there, is both talented and proven when it comes to the production side of things. Last year, they were talented, didn't have what you needed at quarterback. You do this year, but you were also really, really young last year. Like Ruben Bain might have been your best defensive player. He's a true freshman. Francis Mauigoa could have very easily been your best offensive player. Probably have a conversation about him and Xavier Restrepo. Francis Mauigoa, true freshman last year. So they have some young talent cycling up in an experience standpoint and a overall just maturity standpoint. And then you drop in a Cam Ward, sprinkle in some portal additions like a Sam Brown who can pop the top on our defense, a Damian Martinez who can get north and south. I really like where the roster's at. I like how they fit into the ACC mix. A lot of question marks across the board there. I'm just saying, if you want to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit more leisurely this spring and this summer in Coral Gables, I don't think that's irresponsible to do. Now, full transparency, we're a pro Kool-Aid kind of show when it comes to the spring, but even with that being said, I think Miami has a roster to really make some noise in 2024, different than they have in past seasons. Texas A&M, the good folks in College Station, man, God bless them. They love their Aggies. That entire metroplex of Bryan College Station, it lives and dies with that football team. They're very tired of missed expectations. Last 2 seasons, they've been told they are a dark horse college football playoff team. You've heard things like, hey, this roster now, if they put it together, they can really, I'll tell you what, man, that quarterback, they can really, and then what ends up happening is they go 5-7 one year, go 7-5 the next year, and so they're like, listen, don't tell us what we're going to be. Don't get our hopes up. And I'm not here to get your hopes up, but I think when you look at this season compared to previous seasons, the issue in previous seasons, from where I'm sitting, was structure. Now you swap out previous year's structure and you bring in Mike Elko's structure, who did more with less, to be real here, with what he did at Duke. There's way better players at Texas A&M than there was at Duke. I don't think that's a secret. Now the path forward is going to be a lot more difficult at Texas A&M and the SEC, but you look at the schedule, it's tough, but it's not like Takova's leather boots tough. All right, like there's no Alabama, there's no Georgia. Pretty much all of your big games you get at home. Notre Dame, it's at Kyle Field. Missouri, at home. LSU, at home. Texas, that one's going to be pandemonium. That's at home. You have a quarterback who I believe is more than capable. I'm just saying, if what was holding you back previously was your way of doing things and that staff and that structure and not being able to maximize the roster, I think a new way of doing things is a cause for optimism. Again, I'm not buying tickets to Atlanta for the SEC championship just yet, but I do think that now more than ever, A&M should have some reason for optimism than previous years. So Nebraska, Florida, Miami, Texas A&M, your heart's been broke so many times you don't know what to believe, but I'm telling you, you can have some optimism. You can believe again. Our Rod Wave teams for 2024. All right. Let's keep a good thing going, man. We love Twitter on this show. I would encourage you to follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, at JD Piquel. Some folks call it X. We just haven't gotten there yet. I'm going to be real. Maybe by kickoff we'll start calling it X. I don't know. But Deion Sanders in Colorado will always make waves whatever they do. Just the nature of the beast. Whenever Deion Sanders is your head coach, or whenever you're Deion Sanders, every single move you make, it's going to make headlines. Now, he made some headlines recently with an article that came out, and then he made some headlines with Deion Sanders and his things he said on Twitter. We'll talk about that right now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We love college football. You love college football. We talk about it during the month of May. Pretty straightforward. make sure you're dialed in here so you don't miss a minute of what we got going on. We talk about it all year long, but the fact that we're talking about it during the month of May feels like a pretty good indicator that we're in lockstep. All right. So Deion Sanders, to recap it here, there was an article that came out from The Athletic that I thought was a pretty good article. I thought it was pretty fair. I don't think it put him in a bad light. I don't think it put players in a bad light that were cut from his team. But the article was all about the players that he cut and tracking what happened to them since they were cut at Colorado a year later. And everyone just saw the quote graphic of Xavier Smith saying that he didn't even take the time to get to know him, saying that he was destroying kids' confidence, and they took those two quotes and ran with it. Now, The Athletic does great work. The reality of it is you have to pay to read The Athletic's articles. So people probably clicked on the link, saw it cost a certain amount of money to read the article, and said, you know what, I saw the quote graphic, I get the point, I got my narrative, let's run to Twitter with it. And so a lot of people got after Deion and saying, this guy is not being compassionate to players, he should help them find a new place to play, and all these things were said about Deion Sanders. And I came on this show yesterday and just told you, I don't care. I don't care. Is it fair? Of course not. But guess what? It's college football. It's not supposed to be fair. It's not fair that Georgia gets all the better players. It's not fair that Alabama gets all the better players. But that's how the sport works. It's not fair that Colorado went 1-11. That was what Deion Sanders had to work with from a roster standpoint. It's not fair. But guess what? He has to win football games. That is the job he is being paid to do. And a 1-11 roster is not going to magically turn into a 12-0 roster. So guess what? We got to make some changes. Son, we appreciate your time, but you don't have a spot here. You're not going to play here. You should probably hit the portal. I got some better players I can bring in here, and they're going to take your spot. Is it fair? No. But again, that's the job. That's what this whole thing requires. So I had no issue with that. I had zero issue with that. However, that article and the quote graphic, people ran with. Remember that? Shedeur Sanders, he went to Twitter. We discussed this yesterday, and just defended his dad. Now, I personally wouldn't have done it that way, but he defended his dad. I get it. He said, to be honest, I don't even remember this guy who was being cited in this article or in this quote graphic. He must have been very mid at best. Again, I probably would not have done it this way, but it's Shedeur Sanders. One, that's your coach. That's your dad. There's a personal element to it when people are throwing shade at someone that you care about and someone that you support with all of your heart. Also, that's your football team. Like Shedeur Sanders is not some scrub just sitting the bench here, a part of this team. He is the front-facing part of this whole organization next to his dad, Deion Sanders. He's the quarterback. Those are your troops. You defend your troops. So I don't have an issue with him talking trash. I did say this yesterday, and I still feel the same way 24 hours later. If I am in the Shedeur Sanders camp and I'm seeing the mock drafts, I'm seeing Shedeur Sanders being put anywhere from 1 to 5 or wherever he's going to end up in 2025, I would maybe pull him aside and say, hey, look, I get it. I understand you want to defend your dad. But I think Shedeur Sanders today needs to try and help Shedeur Sanders a year from now when it gets to the NFL draft and it's your name being called from the commissioner. Because we saw the odds already in Vegas for him to be the number 1 pick taken since this tweet. They've gone down. And if Spencer Rattler is getting dragged through the proverbial mud for a Netflix documentary of stuff he was doing when he was a senior in high school, for the way he was speaking to teammates on camera, what does it say about you if you're talking to former teammates this way via Twitter? It's just, I don't think it's the look that you want to have. And I'm all for defending your people. I'm all about that. Told a story yesterday about how I got thrown out of a high school basketball game for shouting at a ref for my brother getting fouled hard. Like, I'm all about it. But people need to help Shedeur Sanders see, like, there's a bigger picture here, brother. There is more on the line for you here. There's more at stake for you here. All right? So I was okay with that. I was okay with that. Wouldn't have done it that way. I think there's another way to go about it. I was okay with that. So then we started to see some more tweets come out after we got off the air. And I said it at the opening, I'm totally okay with trash talk too. Like, I have no issue with you talking trash because at some point in time during the fall, there is going to be a time to back it up. So Shedeur Sanders can say what he wants. He's going to hit the field and play. Deion Sanders can say what he wants. He's going to go coach in the fall, and they're going to have to live with whatever their record is. And they understand what they're inviting. They understand the way that they're being perceived by some of the things they're saying on Twitter. It is what it is. So I'm okay with it, but I would say this about the way that Deion Sanders was tweeting yesterday. I don't really like it. I don't think it's the best look for him as a head coach. because you got folks tweeting at Deion Sanders and saying, hey, tell your son that he's not the greatest thing ever. Y'all went 4-8 last year. And then Deion Sanders replies to my guy and says, my son's going to be a top 5 pick. What's your son going to be? LOL. And it's hilarious. He won Twitter. He won the moment. But like Coach Prime, my man's got 271 followers and Tank Dell in a Houston Texans jersey as his profile picture. Do we really need to respond to that? Is that really a battle that we have to win today? Then he says, I got time. Coach Prime, with all due respect, maybe you shouldn't have time. Maybe there are more pressing things that we can be giving our attention to than a dude with 271 followers and a Tank Dell profile picture. Maybe there's a little bit more things at stake here that we can give a little bit more of our thoughts to and our effort to. This doesn't need to have our energy, Coach. It doesn't need it. It doesn't need it, and I don't think you need to do something like that, because if Deion Sanders never replies to those tweets, and then he goes out and quotes a tweet from a college kid's stats and just says, Lord, and I'm like, again, I never even see those tweets if Deion Sanders with 1.8 million followers doesn't quote tweet it and respond. It's not the look that you want to have. You don't want to be tweeting at 18 to 22-year-olds. You're a college football head coach. That's not something that you need to be worried about. You don't need to win Twitter. We need to win football games. Okay? We need to win football games. We don't need to worry about winning the interaction with a college kid playing at Eastern Kentucky or Austin Peay or wherever he was at. It's not important. It's not important. And the thing I would also say, Deion Sanders has made his own path because he's done things his own way. And Deion Sanders is not worried about what anybody has to say. And that's why he's been who he is. That's why he's been so successful. It's why he was able to play 2 sports professionally. It's why he's an NFL Hall of Famer. It's why he's the head coach at Colorado football, because he's done it his own way. And so he's not worried about what anybody else has to say, as I just mentioned. But I do think it's maybe worth noting, hey, who's not doing things like this? Who's not tweeting at people with 271 followers? Who's not tweeting at a player at Eastern Kentucky? Kirby Smart's not doing that. Nick Saban, I don't think, ever used Twitter. Kalen DeBoer's not doing that. Like Lane Kiffin, he'll tweet a little bit, but he'll more so troll people with emojis. It's a little more subtle. Like, they're not mixing it up and going mano-a-mano on Twitter because they have more pressing things to do. Deion Sanders has more pressing things to do. And so the thing I'm trying to say here is Deion is above all of this. Why are we giving this attention? I said the exact same thing about Dabo Swinney. So don't say this is a Coach Prime thing in the comment section. This has nothing to do with Coach Prime. This is all about being a college football head coach. Dabo Swinney gets a call on his radio show from Tyler from Spartanburg talking about what Clemson hasn't done and questioning Dabo Swinney, the way they do things. And Dabo Swinney just lays into the guy. Just lays into him, gives him a piece of his mind. I'm sure he was fed up at that point. We came on this show the very next day and we're like, Coach, if you don't respond that way, I don't even know who Tyler from Spartanburg is. So is it fair? Again, no, it's not fair. It's not fair that you're supposed to just have people say wild things about you on social media and just brush it off and just move on, act like you didn't hear it. But I don't think it's worth your time. I don't think it's worth your time, and I think, to be honest, you're above all that. So that's how we feel about it. At the end of the day, though, Deion Sanders can have the last laugh in all of this if Colorado wins football games. That's what it comes down to. That's why I'm okay with the trash talk. That's why I don't think it's something that is too inappropriate if you're a player, but if you're Deion Sanders, we got to win ball games. We got to win ball games. So, very interesting. We'll keep an eye on the things out there in Boulder, as we always do, and the way that we operate on this show, it is supply and demand. We can't call ourselves the People's College Football Show if we do not operate as men of the people or a show of the people. Like, whatever you want to see, we talk about. Y'all have told us you want to hear more about Deion, so we'll give you our thoughts on Deion, and that's how we operate when it comes to how the show addresses the college football landscape. Now, speaking of needing to win football games, how about Ohio State? The question I want us to unpack here together for Ohio State in 2024, is it national championship or bust? Is that a reality for them this season? Because Denzel Burke during spring football said that it is. And when you take a step back and you look at the Ohio State brand, what are the expectations? Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, and win a national championship. So in some ways, it's always national title or bust at Ohio State. That's why you pick up that hat on National Signing Day. That's why you get to wear that gear when you are walking down the hall as a high school senior and you're a 5-star. Like, your expectations are to go win national titles and go be a high NFL draft pick. Pretty straightforward. But I think when we look at this year, it's not unreasonable to argue that there is some reasons for extra pressure when it comes to this team. Some of that's the external. Some of those are things that this team in 2024 really doesn't have a ton of part to play. Like Michigan winning a national title last year, this team didn't play that team. 2023 Ohio State played that team. Caleb Downs never played against Michigan when he was in an Ohio State uniform. Did it at Bama, I suppose, but you hear what I'm saying. 0-3 the last 3 tries. Ohio State, they can't own what happened in 2022 with this 2024 team. Will Howard wasn't there. Quinshon Judkins wasn't there. Chip Kelly wasn't there. So you need to make sure you're not owning that. But again, that adds some more pressure. Adds some more pressure to Ohio State to slay that dragon and beat Michigan. Also, this is something that's not getting talked about a ton, but the landscape of college football, especially the Big Ten, the way that's shifting, I think that adds more pressure to Ohio State too. Because right now, one, there is a lot more margin for error to win a national championship. Ohio State could lose 2 games, still make the college football playoff, and still go win a national title. Previously, if you lost 2 games, you weren't in the dance. So now you have a few mulligans. More mulligans, more expectations, more pressure on Ohio State. Also, with the Big Ten, as I just mentioned, you add in 4 new teams. What if Oregon wins the Big Ten in 2024? How would that change our perception of Ryan Day and Ohio State? Fair or not, I think it would probably not bode the best for them. Because Ohio State's been trying to climb this mountain and get up this hill and go win the Big Ten again, and Oregon just pops in there the first year and they go win the Big Ten with Dan Lanning and Dylan Gabriel. I think that would rub a lot of folks in Columbus the wrong way and add to their impatience factor. None of this is fair. Like all these externals, all these different narratives around Ohio State, it's really for us as the college football public to unpack, but I want us to be super, super clear about this. Questioning a head coach, that is Ryan Day, who's won north of 85% of his games as a head coach, and wondering if he's a good coach or not. That's not fair. We've been pretty clear about this on this show. We think that's a bunch of malarkey, to use a kind word there. He's a great coach. But because of what they haven't done against Michigan, because of them not winning the national championship, people are like, well, was he born on third base? Was he? Is he all that good? He's a great coach. The third base stuff is nonsense too, but I want us to just get aligned here. It's not fair. But what I like about this team, specifically this group they have right now in-house, coaches and roster alike, nobody in that organization has flinched, and they completely understand the pressure and the expectations and what they need to do in 2024. Even more so, they've had guys that have chosen pressure. Like a lot of the guys that came back on defense that could have gone and made a whole lot of money in the NFL, Denzel Burke, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, they could have gone to the league. They came back. They understand what they're signing up for. They understand there's more pressure on them to come back. Okay, let's roll. Caleb Downs, he could have stayed at Alabama. He could have been all SEC in his sleep at Alabama this upcoming season rather. He chose to come to Ohio State. Could have gone to Georgia, been close to home. He chose Ohio State. He understands there's pressure with that. Choosing pressure. Will Howard, he had options. Visited Miami. I'm sure they were not the only school that was after his services outside of Ohio State. Chose Ohio State. He chose to go play at a place where it is national championship or bust. Beat Michigan or bust. Chip Kelly was a Big Ten head coach. Chip Kelly understands like taking a demotion in some way or sense, being an OC in the same conference, granted at probably a better school overall, there's pressure. There's pressure. He's choosing pressure by going to Ohio State. So this is a team full of individuals that have chosen pressure, have a clear path, and a clear mission. The path, if you're asking me, there's a 3-game season for them. Now, obviously, you have to take care of business in all of them, but there's 3 games that you are circling. At Oregon, at Penn State, Michigan, and Columbus to end the year. I think you probably need to have 2 out of those 3 to feel really good about making the college football playoff. You'd like to win all 3, clearly, but you better beat Michigan. That's the thought in-house. You got to beat Michigan. You ask guys why they came back, they'll tell you some version of unfinished business. I wanted to beat the team up north. That's probably an answer they'll give you. But I think the competitive makeup outside of the roster for this team has never been better. And the reason why I say that is they understand what has to be done. And also I think a lot of these guys understand what it feels like to not get it done. You're saying, JD, not getting it done, how does that help you? Sun Tzu, again, I'm reading The Art of War, so we got a lot of different thoughts running through the brain right now. He has a quote that I think is phenomenal. He says, know thyself, know thy enemy, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. This team knows themselves. This team's been run through that filter of playing against a national championship caliber team. This team understands the battle ahead of them. They understand what the path is. It's got to be a Big Ten championship. It's got to be a national championship. They get that. But with so many guys in this locker room having come to terms with losing to Michigan, not winning the Big Ten, of course there's a gut punch element to that, but I think it also removes the fear from that. And when you don't fear failure, that's a dangerous thing. Now, that is not the same as apathy or saying we don't care if we lose. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying to have experienced the worst possible result and be able to pick yourself up, regroup, and go after it again, that's a dangerous group. That is a hardened group. That is a callous group. And for the record, this is a really freaking talented group. I haven't even talked about Jeremiah Smith at all this entire segment. He's going to be a beast for you. Emeka Egbuka, he's going to be a beast for you. Like, there's so many pieces on this team to go and get it done. But the competitive and mental makeup, I think, from the outside looking in, is what's going to be their greatest asset in 2024. So is it natty or bust for Ohio State in 2024? Absolutely. Is it always? Yeah. I think it's a fair statement to say. But the external and the internal pressure they've invited upon themselves, it's going to be a good one. I'll just say that. It's going to be a good one out there in Columbus, and we cannot wait to watch it this upcoming season. It's going to be a movie out there in Columbus, man. Get your popcorn ready. I cannot wait for that one. I like that. JD mentions The Art of War like somebody that did 10 years. Yeah, I never did 10 years, but I do love that book so far. I'm still going through it, but I'll let y'all know my findings, obviously, on this show as we keep a good thing going. No Art of War reference for Oklahoma, but maybe if you stick around, we'll get it. We'll get another Art of War reference in here in a future show. Who is Oklahoma in 2024? What can we make of them? I think, for the record, Oklahoma is one of the most intriguing teams in the entire college football landscape. Their over-under win total is 7.5. When was the last time Oklahoma looked at their over-under win total on FanDuel and saw the number 7.5? I think it's probably been a while. Some of that you probably lend to them moving into the SEC and the schedule. A lot of that you probably also lend to the inexperience they have on the offensive line and at quarterback. But I think this defense now is going to be fine. I really have no concerns about the defense. They bring back 79% of the production from last year's team. This is a full-grown horse ready to run. There is no pony like trotting out there and trying to figure out the lay of the land and trying to get their legs underneath them. They got a leader in Danny Stutzman. They got Billy Bowman back. They got Jaron Kanik back. They got some dudes now. Adepoju Adebaware. That's a name that we're going to have to get used to saying because he's a dude. Peyton Bowen. Got a lot of pieces on this defense now that I think is going to be more than capable of being up to par in the SEC. That's going to be the tip of the spear. Very minimal adjustments for them defensively when it comes to their personnel. Offense is the true hinge point. And it's a really interesting case study with them because they replace essentially the entire offensive line. And it's going to be a trenches conference in the SEC. You better be ready to roll when you see those edge defenders from an Alabama, from a Georgia, from Texas. They already know what Texas is about. But I'm just saying the overall caliber of player they're going to play in that conference, whether it be regular season or postseason, is going to be fierce. You better bring that hard hat and lunch pail, baby. So the offensive line, work in progress. But on the other side of things, I think you arguably have one of the top-tier skill rooms in the entire conference. And I'm not backing off that statement at all. At running back, you got Gavin Sawchuk, you got Javonte Barnes. At wide receiver, you got Deion Burks, who put on a show and a half in that spring game. Andrew Anthony was balling last year before the injury. Nick Anderson's a walking touchdown. Jaleel Farouk. You are deep. You are real deal deep in that wide receiver room and in that running back room. So the thesis there is there's going to be options to score if you can protect Jackson Arnold and if you can equip Jackson Arnold. That really is the question for me with Oklahoma. How quickly can Jackson Arnold hit the ground running? That is going to define them in 2024. Because as talented as he is, there were some times that we saw him in that bowl game where the game was just a little bit too fast for him. He was still trying to get acclimated. Now, I'm more than fine with that because that's one of his first experiences playing college football, all right? So if he doesn't improve from that bowl game, we got a problem. Like if it takes him a while to get rolling and the game's still too fast, he's inaccurate, we're going to ask a lot of the defense. A lot of the defense. I think that defense is going to be really good, but if you leave them out there for 90-plus snaps a game because we're doing 3 and out after 3 and out, that's not a winning formula. But if he's able to get the ball to playmakers, if he's able to see the whole picture and be able to process quickly, slow the game down, you're going to score a lot of points for reasons I just mentioned. If you get the ball to these players, they're going to make plays for you. They're going to go win for you. And to be real now, in the SEC, they're going to have to make sure they win some shootouts because there are some teams that can score. And that's not me speaking ill of the Oklahoma defense. I just told you I think they're going to be great, but you play Tennessee. I think they're going to score a lot of points. Texas with Quinn Ewers, Ole Miss, Missouri, who knows what they are this year, but they were really good last year. Alabama, Kalen DeBoer's going to have them ready to roll. LSU, you lose Jaden Daniels, but Garrett Nussmeier's in the fold there for you. Gumbo gunslinger, baby. They're going to score a lot of points. So the major unseen variable for me here when it comes to breaking down Oklahoma and the offense specifically, it's going to be a dual OC system. I think Seth Luttrell is going to be the play caller, from what I understand. How much is he able to help Jackson Arnold get up to speed? A couple of facets to that. One, the helmet communication. Is it so simple as, hey, Jackson, here's what I'm seeing. Play clock's ticking down before they get to that 15-second mark. He says, this is what I'm seeing. This is the coverage. Work this side of the field. I don't know if it's quite that straightforward, but having any kind of tutelage pre-snap to help him process the picture, that'd be massive. Because, again, the ability isn't the question for me with Jackson Arnold. It's can we get him up to speed processing SEC-level defenses. The other part of this, too, is can we scheme guys open for him? Like, if we ask Jackson Arnold to go back there every single Saturday and win the football game for us, I think at some point in his career he'll be able to do that. I don't know if you're asking him that in 2024. Super talented. That's just asking a lot of a first-year starter in the most difficult conference in all of college football. So can we create some matchups for him pre-snap where he's looking over the defense, he sees his matchup before the play even starts, he knows where he's going. Barring something wildly unforeseen during the play, he feels pretty good about which side of the field he wants to work, or even better, where he wants to go with the football strictly. That would be a way to roll. So the more they can help him, the more it's going to help the offense because, again, the offensive line, I'm not saying they won't be able to figure it out at some point, but it might be a little bit of a acclimation process for them as well. And it's hard to acclimate in the SEC with all the beasts they have up front on the defensive side of the ball. So who is Oklahoma? Super intriguing. Potential comes to mind when you talk about the Sooners. Defense will keep them in a lot of games, but if the offense can get rolling here, they're going to blow past that 7.5 over-under win total. And we'll be talking about Brent Venables as being one of the top head coaches in the conference. So we'll see what happens there, but Oklahoma, fascinating in 2024, and I promise you that's not the last time we're talking about the Sooners here moving forward. And we still got a lot to get to here. We're going to talk a little bit about Keon Coleman and what he had to say on RG3 in the Ones podcast. After that, we got Matt Brown joining the show, giving us an update on everything he knows and can legally tell us on College Football 25 from EA Sports. We asked him some good questions now, so hang around for that. All right, for those of y'all that saw this, Keon Coleman went on the RG3 in the Ones podcast, and RG3 asked him, hey, what do you say to people who question the toughness of y'all at Florida State and opting out of this thing because y'all were playing Georgia? Because some folks essentially were insinuating, hey, it was Georgia, so some Florida State players said, I don't know if we want to play Georgia, maybe we'll opt out. He asked him that question. Here was Keon Coleman's response.
Of course they want to play. They playing in the maddest HELL Bowl. They mad, but they lost. What y'all mad
Right.
because y'all lost? Y'all think this 2021, y'all supposed to just get in because y'all Georgia? It don't work like that. You would have won. You would have found out who was better between Florida State and Georgia. You would have played us in the Matter Bowl, the bowl that matter. We ain't gonna play y'all in the bowl
Right.
that don't matter. That's a waste of time. But y'all would have won and did what y'all supposed to do. Y'all would have had to see us.
Right.
Would have been not doing it the whole time. All that barking would have put the spirit straight through you, Kai. Ain't no barking. That's dead. They'd have found out, but the world may never know because Georgia decided to lose.
That's true.
We should
That's
question
true.
their toughness to Bama. How y'all keep choking?
So a lot to unpack there. A lot of thoughts on this. The final score in that Orange Bowl was Georgia 63, Florida State 3. There was nothing that even resembled a Florida State football team during last season that took the field against Georgia in that bowl game, okay? So I have a lot of thoughts on this. First, Keon Coleman's a dog. All right, Keon Coleman, for my money, is one of the best wide receivers in college football a season ago, and it was a deep wide receiver class for the NFL draft. He's a dog. If he plays in that game, he makes a difference. Florida State doesn't score 3 points. Second, if I'm a teammate of Keon Coleman's, this is exactly the response that I would want. 110%. 110%. I want you to believe with every fiber of your being that we could have beat Georgia. We could have made a different story against Georgia. Should we have all decided to play in that bowl game? Should we have all been healthy? Things would have maybe worked out differently. You absolutely bet on yourself. Even after the fact, you bet on yourself. Third is I'm sure that Keon Coleman was given some input to not play in this game from a third party, whether it be an agent, whether it be someone in his family, whether it be folks at the NFL level. I don't know, but I'm sure Keon Coleman was told, hey, maybe sit this bowl game out. I don't think it was Keon Coleman saying, I don't want to play, it's Georgia. I think that's a pretty fair statement to say. If I'm a Florida State fan, I still feel slighted. Still feel slighted. In week 14 of the college football season, the College Football Playoff Committee had Florida State at number 4. In week 15 of the college football season, they had them at number 5. Those are the 2 weeks leading up to the final rankings. So if I'm a Florida State fan, what I'm hearing from the committee is, hey, y'all are still in it. Hey, y'all got a chance. Keep in mind now, during those last 2 weeks, Jordan Travis has been hurt. So if you're telling me that you're going to evaluate us and knock us out of the college football playoff with no Jordan Travis, knock us to 6. Put us at 7. Make it extremely clear. Make it abundantly clear you do not see us as a college football playoff team without our starting quarterback. Another video for another time, but I think that's a fair thought to have if you're a Florida State fan. I will say this. I'm not a fan of the trash talk after the fact in a game that you got 60-pieced in a situation where you didn't play in that game. I'm all for trash talk. Talk your trash as much as you want before the game, during the game, because you got to back it up. But talking the trash afterwards in a game that you did not participate on your own accord, I don't love that. I'm not a huge fan of that. And then the other part of this that I don't really appreciate, Keon Coleman shifts the blame to Georgia, saying, well, if Georgia beat Alabama, then we would have cared and we would have actually played them in a game that mattered. Keon Coleman's making the argument that if Georgia beats Alabama, then Georgia gets in and Florida State gets in because Alabama has another loss and they're left out of the college football playoff. That's another discussion for another time, but I think the overall just shifting of the blame, saying, well, it's on Georgia that we didn't play in this game. I see where you're coming from, but even if you feel that way, I don't know if that's something I want to go out and publicly say for the entire world to tear apart. Because I'll tell you what, man, Twitter ran with this one. They ran with this one. In some ways, you kind of feel like, all right, if you feel that strongly about the difference you could have made against Georgia, maybe you should have played in that bowl game. And I understand now, hindsight, it's all 2020, so it is what it is. But Keon Coleman was the first pick of the second round of the NFL draft. All right, now some folks would argue, all right, well, then the team that wanted him, the Buffalo Bills, ended up getting him in the second round, so he went to the team that wanted him. Maybe they wanted him in the first round, did they get him in the second round? If Keon Coleman goes out there and balls out against Georgia, does he sneak into the first round? Does he get himself a little bit of extra money? I don't know. I don't think it's a crazy, irresponsible question to ask, but I really don't like this narrative. This is not just Keon Coleman. This is just everybody that talks about bowl games after the fact when they didn't have guys that played in it, saying we didn't care or it didn't matter. Even if it's true, it's still on you and your organization to care. Like Georgia cared. And Keon Coleman says they cared because they got beat by Alabama, so they were mad. It's like, if I'm Florida State, I should be mad because we didn't make the college football playoff. I should be mad at the committee. I should be mad at the world. Talk about being mad. Georgia, yeah, I'm sure they were mad. Florida State had even more reason, in my opinion, to be mad and to make a statement. So that's not me talking about the college football playoff and what should have happened. That's not me being down on Keon Coleman. But if we talk about games mattering and the bowl games and all that, let's understand now, you can find motivation from anything. The great ones, you talk about Michael Jordan making up stories to get himself motivated. If you weren't motivated to play in that bowl game, that's fine. But let's not shift the blame onto Georgia and say it's their fault we didn't play in the bowl game. Do not get it twisted. If Keon Coleman plays in this game, If Johnny Wilson plays in this game, Jaheim Bell plays in this game, yeah, it's probably a different score. I don't know that after getting 60-pieced, I want to unpack all this again and rehash the Orange Bowl and say we would have put the spear through you. It would have been a different story. I get it. But if you're saying it didn't matter to you, it mattered to Georgia. And again, I think if you're Florida State, you could have had even more motivation if you had found it for it to matter for you. So, again, I think the Florida State folks could be extremely frustrated with the College Football Playoff Committee. I think it was a bad deal if you're a Florida State fan, and I get it. I think the whole way leading up to it was a bad deal. I'd feel slighted too. But I don't know if this is the approach I would take if I'm Keon Coleman. So shout out to RG3 and the Ones podcast. They do great work over there, man. Go check out that show. Go check out that full-length podcast too with Keon Coleman. A lot of good stuff on there. All right. So we got a lot of questions yesterday when I put out the tweet and said, hey, we got Matt Brown from Extra Points Newsletter joining the show. He's the one who broke the news about the multiple covers for the game. What do y'all want us to ask him? And so we did our best to ask him questions that he could answer because there's some things that would send him to EA Sports jail if he were to answer them. But regardless, got a full conversation with Matt Brown about everything that we could possibly ask him about College Football 25. When's it coming out? When's that full reveal? What are the features in the game? What can you tell us? So we peppered him with questions. Without further ado, here's our conversation with Matt Brown. Matt, we're so glad to have you on, man. I already know that your inbox, since dropping that newsletter, has just been filling up with requests. You've been on Feinbaum. You've done multiple appearances. This is probably the best place to start. What can you tell us that will keep you from going to EA jail about College Football 25?
Yeah, I mean, first, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be doing things like this. It's a pleasure to be talking about a story that's, I think, a fun reprieve for my beat, because a lot of what I end up writing about, kind of joke about with ADs and administrators, it feels like the apocalypse beat, right? When you're so focused on existential crisis and enormous changes, from one thing to another, and the video game is fun. What I can tell folks is that I've learned more information about who is going to be on the cover of the game, which is one of the questions that I get asked. I have been being asked, for months. People are very curious about it. One of the things that I can share is that the individuals that are going to be on the cover of this game, and there's more than one cover, are going to be current athletes, which is something that's never happened in the history of the series before. Historically, because you weren't able to pay a current athlete for their NIL, the individual on the cover of the games would be somebody whose eligibility had just completed, or it would be a mascot. It might be a generic, just football player or something. All right, I have a copy of the original Sega Genesis game on my desk. There's a couple of the old PS1 versions where there wasn't really anybody. So they're current athletes. It's not a coach. It's not former athletes. It's not fans, which I think were some reasonable guesses over the past couple of months. They're people that you're going to get to watch play college football this fall.
That cover, first of all, is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
You just have that on hand. That is absolutely electric. Second question to go with that.
Yeah.
In your newsletter, it talks about, different players, different positions from different conferences. Is that a fair assessment that it's going to be, so there's not going to be multiple SEC quarterbacks. It might be a quarterback from one conference and from another conference, it'll be a different position. Is that how it's going to work, we think, or can you tell us that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are multiple covers. There's multiple athletes, and what I can share without getting in trouble here is that those athletes all play different positions, and they come from different power conferences. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that there's 4 covers for 4 power conferences. I'm saying that there's multiple athletes, multiple covers, multiple power leagues, but there's only one quarterback. So you could theoretically have a Big 12 quarterback, and then an SEC edge rusher, and then a Big 10 kicker. It's not a Big 10 kicker, but that would be a thing that can be set up here. So you're not going to see multiple versions of quarterbacks.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. Now, when it comes to more information, I know everyone's tugging on your shirt, asking you to tell us the secrets about this game. But EA, when they released that trailer earlier this year, they said, full reveal coming in May. And you and I are recording this at 4:04 Central Time, May 1st. So in case something drops before then, I guess we'll have a different conversation. This is a moot point. But from what you have heard, is there any further information on when that full reveal is coming now that we're in the month of May?
Yeah, what I had been hearing internally was that the middle of May was the target. I shared a specific date in our newsletter a little while ago. But what I've learned, and I think many of our colleagues on this beat have learned, is that plans can change quickly with EA. And you might have a date that's tentatively, I don't know, like May 15th. And now, they weren't necessarily expecting to have this much chatter about the cover, right now, right? Like I was able to get this information, in a way that their comms team wasn't planning on. And so maybe that expedites the timeline. Maybe it changes it. The expectation that I have from what I had been told is middle of May. And that full reveal is going to be a reveal that is much more focused on answering many of the myriad gameplay and feature specific questions that people have. A lot of what I've been able to learn, right, over the last 2 years, a lot of it's been through open records. It's been through my sources in the licensing industry, with on campus, some of it at EA, but you don't get in trouble for leaking audio assets the same way that you might about leaking information about mascot mode or Road to Glory, right? So like that's kind of the push and pull of trying to get information about this game.
I was going to say, Matt, when you put out this news on your newsletter, which, quick plug again, Extra Points newsletter, go check it out. Matt crushes all the coverage over there. That's why we're able to have this information we have. You're kind of like the voice of the people here. Like you said, this wasn't something that EA put out this release and said multiple cover athletes. Like this was Matt Brown, the people's champ, got this for us. So with that being the case, I know there's still more information you can't disclose. But when we put out on our Twitter page, hey, we have Matt Brown on the show. What do y'all want to know? I mean, all the questions are like, what about this gameplay? What about Road to Glory? What about team builder, conferences, all that? What is the detail or the coolest detail that you are at liberty to share with us when it comes to gameplay?
Yeah, I think a few things that I can share beyond the fact that EA plans to answer a lot of these questions in like 2.5-ish weeks, right? One of the things that I've heard from developers who've been working on this game that's been a priority is this idea of wanting to make the dynasty recruiting mode different, and it is particularly to help. I want to say like less of a grind, but so the player would feel more attached to particular recruits, right? I guess through many of the previous years of this game, lots of people are playing dynasty mode, but it's their data would show that the majority of those are only 2, 3, 4 years, rather than people necessarily doing a 60-year-long dynasty. And so if there's tweaks that can be made, so like, hey, if you're signing a guy in week 6 and you could see that he runs a 4.2 40, you want to be excited to play with that guy next year. You want to already be thinking about how you can incorporate that person into different packages. And then you want to have some drama and a sense of reward and success as you go through that process. The other thing that was really reiterated to me, and I think is one of the really fascinating game development questions for this game, is how to make this as realistic and accurate as possible while still being fun. And I think you and many of your colleagues at On3 know better than most what an absolute grind roster management is right now in college football. And I think if we made this game exactly how it is in real life, it wouldn't be fun. It'd be way too hard. We'd all have gray hairs. The game would be texting us at 2 o'clock in the morning to go text recruits or something. It'd be a mess. So you have to figure out, okay, we want this to be realistic, right? We want to have transfers. We want to have NIL. We want to be able to rebuild your roster beyond just high school recruiting. But where is that slider? Where do you set the line to where it's approachable and accessible and still fun? And I think that's part of what the fine tuning process is, kind of at the end of the development cycle, and where that ends up, I think is going to be fascinating, because that's one of the tricky things about making a good franchise mode in any sports game. How to make it. We don't all have to have master's degrees in salary capology.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Like, I don't want my quarterback week 4 being tampered with, hitting the portal after the year. Like, I'm okay with tampering with someone else's roster, and hopefully that's something that's involved in the game, but I don't want my quarterback dipping for a nice NIL bag. I think EA has alluded to this a little bit as well. Transfer portal, NIL, things like that. We can expect that in the game. Is that fair to say at this point?
Yeah, that's my understanding. What I've been telling people and what's been relayed to me is that college football is a different sport than it was the last time we had this game back in 2013, 2014. And some of those changes are about recruiting and roster management. And it's not just NIL in the transfer portal. Signing limits are different. We have multiple signing days, which we didn't have the last time this game came out. The recruiting through JUCOs looked different than it did back in 2014. And also, like, the game itself has changed. The rules are a little bit different. RPOs are a much bigger part of a standard college football offense than they were the last time the game came out. How the options run and how common that is looks a little bit different. The distribution of where recruits are and what kind of recruits there are looks different. And so those are all things that I know the development team is highly tuned into and wanting to make those tweaks, right? Like in previous years, if you played for 10 years, because of some bug in the game's logic, Army and Navy regularly became like top 10 programs. And you would regularly see, like, there's this 4-star guy out of British Columbia, and there's these 2 white defensive backs out of Vermont, and they're both amazing. And I'm not to say that can't ever happen, right? We've seen and written about great recruits from New Hampshire and South Dakota and everything, but that's not how it typically works, right? And we have better data on how talent distribution and recruiting works now than we did a decade ago, and I would expect that to be reflected in this game.
Yeah, there's so many lifelike components to this game from what we can tell. Like Chris Fowler, even earlier, maybe it was last night or it was earlier today, dropping like, hey, it took me 2 years, 115 plus hours of work to have every single call dialed into this game. Are we going to have multiple broadcast crews from like different networks? It sounds like we have multiple broadcast crews, period, but will it be like, hey, you got Fox here, you got CBS here, you got ESPN here, or is it all ESPN from what we can tell?
It's a great question, and I could definitely independently confirm ESPN. I think we wrote about the college game day crew on Extra Points over a year earlier. I remember I was covering game day out in Montana, and like I asked them, are you going to be in the game? They're like, yeah, we started the recording, and that was even before the game got originally delayed. But because it does take forever to do this, because all of the audio is completely new in this game, right? Like I think that's worth reiterating. You can't just reskin the last college football game. None of the code, none of the audio, none of the stadium renderings, none of those assets can be used in this game. They had to rebuild everything, which then included a lot of audio recording. I have asked if there are other companies involved with broadcasting, and I have not been told one way or the other. Historically, this game has been an ESPN-specific property. Off the top of my head, the only collegiate licensed game that I think had different broadcast networks were some of the early college basketball titles. I can't say that it's not happening, but I have not been able to get a confirmation from anybody at Fox or CBS about their involvement. And I have to think at this point, if they were, they probably would have leaked it to somebody.
Yeah, right. When ESPN is saying, hey, I'm in the game. Like, I was waiting for that Joel Klatt tweet to drop that says, I'm in the game, or Gus Johnson, I'm in the game. So, I guess we'll see when we get more of a full reveal. Yeah, I guess we'll see when we get there. But regardless, Matt, last question for you here. You have already made it very clear you will be playing this game. You've been playing this game for a while, given that copy that you showed us, which is absolutely phenomenal. Are we starting with like a G5 school and building it up? Are we going full dynasty mode with Ohio State? Because I believe that's your alma mater. Like, what's the path forward here for when Matt Brown gets the sticks for the first time?
I don't know about you, but I can't identify with anybody who gets this game and fires up dynasty and thinks, all right, time for Alabama. Like just like you don't play a video game on easy mode, right? I grew up outside of Columbus. I did go to Ohio State, but when I play this, once I figure out the controls, and that might mean me playing online and getting thrown into a dumpster by some middle schoolers, right? Who don't have the same kind of responsibilities that I do. But if I'm doing dynasty, give me Akron, give me Kent State, give me somebody at the bottom of Conference USA, and build up from that way. I feel like that's a core part of this game is recruiting 2-stars. And trying to out scout somebody to beat Tulane for a kid rather than play with every other built-in advantage. If other people want to do that, like that's fine, but that's not how I enjoy these games.
No, I think you said it perfectly there, Matt. Some people just aren't built for the Eastern Michigan route through the college football playoff and eventually hoisting that national championship and bringing it back to Ypsilanti. Not everybody's built like you and I, Matt. It's too bad, but it's true, and we're going to be able to find out who those people are here very, very soon when that game drops. Really quickly, I think everybody has sort of echoed the sentiment. I know you've reported on it as well in your newsletter. Mid-July is still the expected release date here?
Yeah, I think we're at a point where I wouldn't necessarily put in that PTO request, but I've written this a couple of times, and I've heard this elsewhere that July 19th is the expected date. That can maybe get tweaked a little bit one way or the other, but mid-July is when you should be looking into potentially getting sick for a couple of days.
Yeah, hey, it happens. I hear something's going around middle of July, so hopefully everyone's safe, but we'll see if somebody catches that, and maybe a whole lot of somebody catch that. Matt Brown, Extra Points newsletter, the man, the voice of the people when it comes to this game and all the details around it. Appreciate you making time, man. Really excited for this to drop.
No, of course. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff there from Matt Brown, the voice of the people when it comes to all the intel we can find when it comes to college football 25. Him and Pete Nakos have been on top of it from the jump. This channel, though, tell you what, I don't think anybody talks more CFB 25 than us right here, so would encourage you to be subscribed. Quick correction from our transfer portal segment, Dominique Williams. We said he was Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year. He was Big 12 Honorable Defensive Lineman of the Year. Difference. Byron Murphy was Defensive Lineman of the Year in the Big 12 from Texas. So, going to get to your questions here in just a matter of moments. Get in the chat right now. Like the video. Get in your comments. Want to hear from y'all. Nick Brake about to join the show. The hard count today, though, I want to make sure we get this out there for y'all so we can make sure we're looking right for summer. The hard count is brought to y'all by our friends over at Rowback. Now, you guys all know how much I love Rowback. If you've been tuned into any of the stories that I do during the season, we do a little Friday Q&A. We don't put it on the YouTube channel. It's just you and me. I get something from Starbucks. I sit on the back porch, and we talk some ball. And I'm always wearing a Rowback hoodie, a Rowback shirt. Whatever it is, I'm wearing Rowback. So Rowback, I wear them all the time for a reason. They have the best polos, the best hoodies, the best quarter zips on the market. And if you need a polo to last you the entire day on a hot game day, Rowback has got you covered. Moisture-wicking technology, 4-way stretch, makes it easy to move in while keeping you feeling fresh. So it's not chafing. It's not something where it gets all soggy. You got to switch shirts halfway through the day. Rowback, moisture-wicking, keeping you feeling good. It's a good way to go about doing your business. Now, Rowback also has everyday shorts that are a perfect pairing. They're comfortable, have elastic waistband, great fabric that is made to stretch. Also now, they've released a ton of new products between the most comfortable tees I've ever worn, bathing suits. Rowback is a ready for the warm weather kind of operation. So Rowback has also been proudly leading the charge when it comes to the NIL front. They've signed partnerships with college stars like Jalen Milroe, Cade Klubnik, and many others. They're the go-to brand for college athletes. Most important thing you're going to hear me say during this ad read, if you use code JD, that's just those two letters, no periods, J and then the D, at rowback.com, you get a generous 20% off your first purchase for all new customers throughout the end of this week. So act now. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, quarter zips, and more with code JD. Now, Rowback, this is not a part of the ad read. They have been with us, this show, The Hard Count, since we were doing it in a lobby in Waco, Texas, pseudo-independently. So Rowback has been supporting the show for a while, been supporting me for a while. They've been supporting us. They're for the people, by the people. Go ahead and use that code and get yourself something at a discount. Nothing better than stuff that doesn't come at full price, you know? Now, someone who knows their price and got a high price after last night's kickball game, Nick Brake. Nick, talk to us, brother. The people have been blowing up my inbox. I had to put my phone on Do Not Disturb last night because of all the calls I was getting, people asking if I knew. They would place bets. A lot of things being said about last night's kickball game. Talk us through what happened. Give us the play-by-play.
I went 3 for 4. I was a little tired at the end, so a weak kick right to the first baseman. But I did win. We won the game.
That's the most important
So we'll
stat, baby.
Yep, we'll take it.
Club dub.
Yep,
Club
2-2.
dub, baby.
It's a streak.
Boys are going on a streak.
We're on a heater right now.
Heater.
So this question was asked yesterday. Didn't get to it. Gonna get to it now. Goat Dog says, JD, what should the ACC rename to? Because you think about it. There are teams playing who are on the Pacific. They're on the Pacific Coast.
Yeah.
It should be renamed. So the answer for Boom Time was the PAA or the PACC 12. Like the pack with 2 C's,
okay.
12. I kind of like it. What do you think?
He has 2 A's in there or just
two C's. Sorry.
Pacific
getting my words mixed up.
Pacific Athletic Conference?
I think so.
Athletic Coast Conference?
No, I think Pacific Atlantic Coast Conference.
Oh, okay. Let's just stick with ACC, and let's change the meaning of Atlantic. Let's go All Coast Conference.
Yeah.
So you got all the coasts covered. We got Stanford in there. We got Wake Forest in there. We got Florida State in there for now. I mean, that really would throw a wrench in this whole naming operation. I like ACC. We just change the meaning of the A. We keep the acronym the same. The logo, maybe we tweak it a little bit with the colors to try and incorporate the new teams. I like ACC, All Coast Conference.
Okay.
What do you think about that? You like that?
All Coast Conference. I mean, like the Arctic Ocean coast? Like,
yeah, I see. Okay, I see what you mean. Boomtime's a fan. Boomtime just got in the chat and said he likes it.
I like it, JD.
If it's good enough for Boomtime, it's good enough for us.
JD,
Yeah.
I usually understand what the truth is asking. Today, I do not know. It says, what is the average size of JD offensive line from left tackle to right tackle? You probably know more than me.
I think he's asking from my college days.
Okay.
In that, I would honestly have to really look at the roster. I think we were a smooth, like, 300 might be an average way to 300 is probably rich. We were probably right around 295. Like, we weren't the SEC, all right? It's still the Ivy League. It's still FCS football. We had some big boys up front, though. Now, in an ideal world, if I'm calling my shots in a recruiting department, we're recruiting 310 plus. 310, big wingspan. Want to see good athleticism. Ideally, a two-sport background. Okay, I want to make sure we got good bend with the hips and not at the knees, or not a waist bender. I want to make sure we got good flexibility. So that'd be my perfect offensive line if I'm calling the shots. But those boys, man, they did a good job. They did a great job for us up front back in the day up there in upstate New York.
JD, today, so we don't actually have any other questions because the arguing in the debate.
Oh, really?
In
Okay.
the chat has been so much. It's been about Oklahoma. JD, I mean, people are hating on Oklahoma. What do you say to the haters, or what do you say maybe to the people who are a little overvaluing Oklahoma? I know someone earlier today said they're going 10-2 this year.
Yeah,
What do you
10-2.
think?
It's possible. It's a little bit rich for me right now. I just don't know what Jackson Arnold's going to be. And the thing with everyone who's defending Oklahoma, too, nobody knows what Jackson Arnold's going to be. You can take an educated guess, and I think the educated guesses in Norman are probably a little bit more optimistic than the educated guesses in Austin, Texas. I don't think that's a stretch. But it's still going to be his first year as a starting quarterback. It's still going to be his first year in the SEC. The bowl game, you saw flashes. You also saw a lot of poor decisions that led to a lot of turnovers. So I think it's fair for us to just kind of hold our opinion loosely. And I would say the same thing about Nico Iamaleava. Like, super talented, him and Jackson Arnold from that same class. It's going to be their first time starting the entirety of a season, hopefully, if they're able to stay healthy, in the college football capacity. So it might take a second for them to get their feet totally underneath them. If Jackson Arnold struggles in the game against Tennessee or vice versa, if Nico ends up having a tough month of October, like, give them some time. What they are right now, I believe, is going to be vastly different than what they are this time next year.
JD, no disrespect to whoever said they were going to go 10-2. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule right now. That's a tough 10-2.
It's tough, dude. It's
Bama, LSU, Missouri will be tough.
If they go 9-3,
Yeah.
if it's the right looking 9-3, they could be a playoff team, which is a wild statement to say. Where it used to be, if you lost 2 games, you're out of the dance. They could be 9-3 and find
Absolutely.
themselves in that 12-team playoff as an at-large bid, which is wild, but it's a reality.
To play at Ole Miss too.
At Ole Miss, yeah, dude, it is not an easy trek for them at all. Tell you what, that game at Auburn, the game after Tennessee, because that game against Tennessee is going to be extremely, extremely emotional. Josh Heupel coming back to Norman, like, it'll be a lot of storylines. How do they do when they come out of that game? Win or loss, it'll be hard fought. They're drained, they're beat up. It was a very intense game emotionally, like I just said. How do they operate after that? And they go to Auburn and play at Jordan-Hare. That's going to be, I think, a really good test for us, and I think set a pretty good course for their season. Because you go 2-0 in that stretch, Auburn and Tennessee,
Yes.
you feel different about how you're looking in October, November.
Yeah, but then if you go 0-2, you're 3-2. I think you start to look and you're like, wow, man, let's just get bowl eligible.
Yeah, the confidence starts to dwindle probably. Like, there's a real something to, starting hot and being able to lay a strong foundation early on in the season.
Absolutely.
That's good stuff. Nick, appreciate you holding it down in the chat, man, and getting a good pulse for what the people are talking about. That's great stuff, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Good deal. Any big weekend plans?
My brother-in-law is graduating college tomorrow, so I'm going to go see that.
Okay. Where's you graduating from?
From, the greatest school in the world, the Western Kentucky University, the Hilltoppers.
Tops on top, baby.
Tops on top.
Tops on top. Okay, well, that'll be awesome, man. You have a blast. Thank you for everything. You have a tremendous weekend, babe.
Yeah, likewise. Same to you.
That's the man. Nick Brake, holding it down, making everything that you see here happen. We're very glad to have you all a part of this. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're watching in a live capacity, it's just that little button underneath your picture that you're looking at right here. Go click that for us before you leave. We appreciate you so much for that. This is awesome. This is absolutely phenomenal. We were talking college football for over an hour during the month of May. Said it yesterday. I'm going to say it again. Like, that's just that's the greatest job in the world. And we appreciate y'all allowing us to have this. We appreciate y'all tuning in and making it the college football community that it is. Don't let the community aspect end here, all right? On the socials, I'm wide open there. Tweet at me, DM me on Instagram. We'll talk some ball. And I appreciate y'all making this show what it is and making this community what it is. So from us to you, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're grateful for y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.